BRUCAST is back, baby.
This BRUCAST episode is brought to you by the BRUCAST Store. Explore a store filled with awesome goodies from hoodies to t-shirts to mugs. We've got you covered. Stay in style with BRUCAST. Embrace the shock, set the trend. Visit now brew-cast.com/store. Link below.
Back with the fire, can't you see the flames? From Deutschland steps comes the BRUCAST name. Voices like thunder breaking all the chains. Unleash the fury like a runaway train.
Alright, hi everyone, welcome back to another BRUCAST episode. If it's your first time watching the show, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening to Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please rate the show 5 stars. This will ensure that the podcast recommends to even more people and allow me to keep doing what I love. BRUCAST also on Instagram, X, and TikTok, where I upload shorts with the highlights of the show. So follow now, BRUCAST on Instagram, X, and TikTok. Links in the description below.
Here we thrive, we survive!
Hey there, BRUCAST fans! Welcome back to another BRUCAST episode. If it's your first time watching the show, make sure to comment, like, and subscribe. Yes, leave a comment. I want to know what you thought about today's episode. I want to see some engagement in the channel. So again, leave a comment. I want to read all of your comments and, most importantly, subscribe. All right, so our guest today is Dr. Chris Gray. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, Brew. Thank you for having me on. It's good to be with you.
Thank you for being here. It's an honor. Dr. Chris, so you are the psychologist. So what about we start with introductions?
Sure. So my name's Chris Gray, and I have been a consumer psychologist for 30 years and working with some of the biggest brands and most esteemed brands, many of those that people will know, the North Face, Adidas, Walmart, P&G, PepsiCo, et cetera, et cetera. And the work that I do is really in helping brands, companies, organizations, sales and marketing teams understand the inner worlds of their customers so that they can find ways to make connections with them, form long-term relationships that benefit both buyer and seller. And as I like to say, help them to influence consumer behavior without feeling gross about it. In the last 6 years, I decided to go out on my own after many years in the agency world. And so I've been doing this on my own for about 6 years, and I love what I do. People are endlessly fascinating, so I'm never bored, and it's been a great ride.
All right, so you worked many years in an marketing agency, is that correct?
Marketing agencies, yeah.
And now you're helping people mark their stuff without feeling gross.
Yes, that's the important part, right? We can, as I always say, we can get anyone to buy something once through tricks and all those things, but that really isn't sustainable from a business standpoint. It's much more financially sustainable to maintain positive relationships with your customers versus tricking them into buying something they don't need and having them walk away and then having to find more and more people to bring in so you can trick them.
Did you just describe the pyramid scheme?
Pretty much, yeah. Right.
So, Dr. Chris, would you say that many companies operate with this mindset?
I think, I don't want to paint all companies with a broad brush, but I do think that within marketing in general, psychology is often used as a bag of tricks that you just kind of whip out to get people to buy stuff that they, really don't need or don't want. And when I started my company on my own, I really thought hard about, why am I so passionate about this? Like, what is it about it that matters? And in thinking about the purpose of what I do, I see my purpose as really elevating the role of psychology in the business world as a force for good. One that empowers buyers and sellers alike to, make sure that everybody comes out a winner. And when you do that, that's how you can influence customer behavior without feeling gross about it, because you're actually providing value at the same time that you are influencing.
It feels very noble. It feels very noble. No, but I'm not saying that as a joke. It's a compliment.
I appreciate that. I have such a passion and respect for psychology. I mean, I've been doing this my whole life. And, I really hate seeing it used against consumers versus for consumers. And, that is just, it is in the marketing world, it's rampant. And I think a lot of it is you have a lot of people out there who, psychology is one of those weird things. If you have a heart condition, you go to a cardiologist because they have experience and they kind of understand the heart and they know how to, fix it if there's something wrong. I think psychology, people look at it a little differently because we all feel like we know psychology a little bit because we all have psychology, right? We all know, like, we have feelings, we have thoughts, we have all those things. And so we inherently start to think, well, I understand psychology. But the thing is that psychology is far more complicated than I think the average layperson realizes. And most of our inner world, the reasons why we make decisions, the subconscious things that influence us are not really something that we can access ourselves. We think we can, it feels like we can, and that makes it a little difficult. But the reality is that unless you've really studied psychology and appreciate the nuances and the complexities of human behavior, just throwing out tricks from a psychology standpoint or hacks, as I hear it all the time, it really, sometimes those can create short-term wins, but they usually result in long-term financial issues or long-term trust issues with your brand. So for me, it is a matter of passion. It's a matter of respect for psychology and respect for consumers, and so, yeah, it is something I'm passionate. I feel very strongly about. And it is a little bit of a crusade, I guess.
Sounds like a good one. Yeah. If you're passionate about it, like, you're not working, basically. Right? Isn't there a quote like that? If you do what you love, it's never going to feel like work.
Yeah, I think that's probably been the case for me. As I've been doing this my entire adult life, and I don't think I've been bored a minute in my life, just because people are endlessly fascinating. Circumstances are always changing. The culture is always changing. And so there's always more to learn and more to, kind of figure out. And I always say, the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. And it's that sense of curiosity that really compels me.
That's amazing, man. That's really cool. Man, you said something about hacks. Like, some companies, they utilize some hacks in order to trick the consumers.
Yeah.
Could you expand a little bit on what you mean by that?
Absolutely. And, in the marketing world, it's pretty common to see, articles or posts or things about, here's 5 hacks to get people to buy something, and when I look at those, typically they're not coming from someone who's a psychologist or has studied psychology. Sometimes, once in a while, they're coming from somebody who read one Malcolm Gladwell book, and now suddenly they're a behavioral expert. But the thing with that is, like I said, we can get anyone to buy something once. I mean, this day and age of marketing, we're sophisticated enough. We have the knowledge, we have the tools to get anyone to buy something once. But again, if that person walks away from the transaction feeling like they've been tricked or they've been coerced into buying something they don't want, I mean, think about your own experience. And we've all been in that scenario where, we've been kind of coerced into buying something, whether it's a pushy salesperson or, a website that, just, you can't miss out on this and all those things. You walk away from that not feeling so great about what just happened, especially if the product doesn't live up to the hype. And the reaction, the normal human reaction to feeling coerced or tricked is resentment. It can be frustration, it can be anger. And if that continues over time, that turns into avoidance. And if you're a brand and your customer base is avoiding you, that's probably not a recipe for success. And so, I wherever I can, I try to call these out. And the thing is that many of these hacks are based in actual, cognitive biases or psychological principles, but they lack the nuance or the understanding of how this actually works to make these sustainable, long-lasting behavior change that could really impact positively the bottom line for an organization. An example I'll give you is, it's pretty common now. If you go to book a hotel, and every time you go to book a hotel room, it says, "Oh, it's the last one at this price." It's like, okay, every time, really? And that's just using scarcity, which is a common cognitive bias that, when something is scarce, that we tend to value it more, or we tend to want it more. But the thing is that, after your 10th time seeing the line that this is the last available at this price, you start to clue in and maybe something's up here and maybe they're not being completely upfront with me. And that doesn't lead to positive associations with your brand. That leaves a bad taste in people's mouth. And now your brand starts to become associated with negative emotions, which is something you should want to avoid.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I have a buddy who works for one of those websites. I won't mention his name for obvious reasons, but one of the last times I saw him, that was just after he got the job, and it was like, bro, are those timers on those websites real? Like the counts, and it was
The
like
countdown,
the
right?
countdown of the people, like how many people are watching this right now. And it was like, yeah, Bruno was like, bro, you need to tell me the truth. And it's like, yeah, and I pressure him. It's like, yeah, it's fake. I mean, it's fake. It sucks. Yeah. But I mean, it's there for a reason. It works. But after I discovered that, I started accessing many of those websites with the incognito mode, right? For example, buying a plane ticket. Apparently, you correct me if I'm wrong, but if you use your incognito mode, they won't track your cookies, and for whatever reason, the price would be lower. I don't know, but it feels dirty, Like now I know what you mean, the gross part. why
Yeah,
why should I be using the incognito browser for a normal thing,
yeah.
Yeah.
And if you think about what a brand as a concept is all about, a brand is a mental shortcut, right? So the brand is a symbol that represents something, right? And when a brand goes about it in a way that is authentic and real and trustworthy, then that brand starts to represent those things. It represents, this is a company I can trust. I like their products. They'll do right by me. It'll be, a win for me if I buy something from them. But when those tricks come to light, those positive associations start getting crowded out by negative associations. I can't trust this brand. They tried to trick me last time. They use the countdown clock every time I go on. And those negative associations start to stick to the brand as a symbol. And so that cognitive shortcut goes from telling me I can trust, I'm going to get value out of this, to, boy, I better think twice about this. And that's not helpful in the long term for any brand.
Mm-hmm. So the brands who are doing that, they're just thinking short term.
Yes, absolutely. And the sad thing is that sometimes it works, or sometimes it feels like it works. Like you said, that countdown clock, or this is the last, available at this price, does create a sense of urgency to buy now, right? But at the expense of eroding your brand in the long term. And so it's a short-term win that ultimately ends up creating long-term challenges for the brand.
I see. Ooh. But that's tough, because let's take Amazon, for example. Someone once told me, we were having this discussion about the Amazon app. The UI sucks. We were talking how much we both hated the Amazon app, how much it could be better, how many other apps that are out there use more modern UI, and so forth. And my buddy said, yeah, Bruno, like, why would they bother? They won't lose any customers. They are the biggest one, like the biggest online not resell, like selling website in the world. Like, they don't have any incentive to be more like, improving anyway. Like, we're just using the UI as an example, but
Well, I mean, my counter to that is, yeah, Sears used to be the largest store in the world.
Which one?
Sears.
Sears. Okay.
Yes. Oh, you're not even familiar with it. Sears is a Chicago-born company. The Sears Tower in Chicago was the Sears headquarters. Sears started, well, I'm not sure exactly when it started, but like late 1800s, early 1900s probably, and they were a catalog company, right? So, back in the old days, you get the catalog in the mail and you could order from them. But they also had retail stores, and they were literally the largest store in the world for decades. In fact, there's a radio station in Chicago called WLS, and WLS stands for World's Largest Store, because the antenna used to be on top of the Sears Tower. And, I'm sure somebody at some point said that about Sears. Why should they change? They're the biggest store in the world. They don't need to care about their customers' experience. And here we are, like, you weren't familiar with them.
Virgin as well. Remember Virgin, the store?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And there's many stores that we could talk about that way, that, sort of became complacent because they were successful. And I think that is a big mistake. It is important to always be aware that situations change, people change, cultures change. And if you're not investing in keeping up with that, whether that is technology or customer understanding or staying on top of trends or a better UX, then you're going to end up falling behind. And once you realize you've fallen behind, it's very hard to start catching up, as all of these, Sears could tell you, and many others. And so, I get the argument, like, why should they bother? Why should Amazon bother improving their UX? Well, because someone else will have a better UX at some point, or someone else will offer something better at some point. And so it's important that we constantly be thinking about, how can we improve? What's changing that we need to address within our own operations? Otherwise, you really risk falling behind.
Would you say that many of those companies, they unwillingly perform those behaviors where they yeah, you nodded yes.
Hey, ask me the question again. I want to make sure I understand it before I respond.
So the whole point of your reaching out to those companies and helping them is influence customer behavior without feeling gross, right? That they are doing a good job at being a company, in other words, selling ethically, and basically at the end of the day, hopefully making more money, right? Would you say that many of those companies, they act unwillingly of those facts? Or would you say from your experience that they know they're doing it, but they try to persevere on those habits because they are desperately trying to make more money regardless how?
It's hard for me to say either or. I think there's probably, like in most cases, it's a little more complex. I think it's probably some combination of those things, along with, some other things as well. I mean, when you have a huge company, it's hard to make changes quickly. It's hard to get everybody on board with, different initiatives and things like that. So I think it's a combination of multiple factors, but certainly complacency is one. I think the challenges of a company that has become a behemoth and now is hard to make changes quickly, and some of it is just not even realizing what they're doing. Yeah,
they don't even realize what they're doing. Chris,
what I would say about it is there's no shame in that. It is a natural human tendency. Things are going well. I want to ride this out. Normal human tendency. But if you're in the world of business and your goal is to be as effective and profitable as possible, you can't afford that. You can't afford that complacency.
I see. Oof. Chris, when I was about 16, 17, I read a book which is called, at least I read it in Portuguese, was called A Lógica do Consumo. The translation would be the logic of consume, I guess. Anyway, it's from this writer called Martin. What's the name? Martin Lindstrom. Have you heard about it?
Yes, I know. I don't know Martin Lindstrom personally, but I'm aware of his work. Yes.
That's the only book that I ever read on the subject, and I remember I was mind blown. They
Yeah, he's a smart cookie for sure.
He's a smart cook. All right, so I read a good one, and one of the examples that one of the things that blew my mind back then was how the new car smell is actually fake. It's a spray can. I was like, what? It's so fabricated. What do you mean by it's yes, yeah.
Funny. Yeah, I mean, and I don't know that for 100%, but I wouldn't be surprised. You think about the associations that we make as consumers, and that they relate to any one of our senses, whether that's seeing, hearing, feeling, smelling, and in this case, smelling. We associate that new car smell with like excitement and something that is cool and new and fresh. And I think it would be interesting if that were actually true, that they've learned what this smell is and how to sort of permeate it throughout a car.
Let me check. I think it's true. I mean that's what I remember. Is the new car smell fake? Let's look it up.
I love it.
It's loading, guys. So the new car smell isn't fake. It is real, complex scent from volatile organic compounds, off-gassing from the glues, plastic, leather, and fabrics in the car interiors, creating a chemical cocktail. But some manufacturers enhance it with specific fragrances to attract consumers. While many find it pleasant, these chemicals can pose minor health concerns.
Well, I've learned something today for sure. Okay.
So my question to you, Dr. Chris, is this gross? Is like, do the companies I want to define the gross category. What would you define a gross marketing strategy?
It's a little. I mean, let's say if they were actually like spraying new car scent in cars, if so, everything's on a continuum. I would say, if you're spraying this into a brand new car just to boost the smell a little bit, it's a little sneaky, but I wouldn't necessarily call that gross per se. Now, if you're taking a used car and spraying that in, like trying to pretend that this is a new car, then that gets into gross territory for me.
I see. So you're deceiving the consumer.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to get them to associate this with a brand new car when it's actually not. That would be gross to me.
I see. So at the end of the day, your goal is to make sure that the consumer returns. Okay.
Yeah, my goal, really, when it comes to consumers, is I have a concept called resilient relationships, and that's what I try to help companies create with their customer base, our resilient relationships. Because those resilient relationships, brand community, and you're more likely to return to them. You're more likely to buy from them again. You're more likely to buy more, to spend more. And those are all great things that, any brand would want. But that is earned. And, I have 5 components of resilient relationships, which I call the 5 F's. So resilient relationships are familiar. So companies are familiar and understand their customer as best they can. And customers, see, these are both like any relationship, two-way street, right? And customers feel like they know and understand the brand. They're favorable. So that's just affinity. There's a positive regard going both ways, both from brand to customer and from customer to brand. They're felt deeply. So these aren't just transactional relationships. They're very much based in emotional needs. They're faithful, which is very important to any brand. We think about loyalty and things like that. So they're faithful to the brand, but also brands are showing faithfulness to their customers by understanding the challenges they're trying to solve, by trying to make sure that they're always adding value. And the last one, which I think from a brand standpoint is one of the most important, is they're forgiving. And if you think about any human relationship, if you have a great relationship with someone and let's say, they screw up somehow, like they blow you off for a lunch date or something. If you have a positive relationship with this person, if you have a resilient relationship, you're going to give them the benefit of the doubt. If they call and say, I'm so sorry, I forgot, let's reschedule for another time. You're much more likely to do that than someone you're just about to meet and they blow you off for lunch. That's a different story. So for brands, everybody screws up. We all make mistakes, including brands. And, there's zillions of, examples of that throughout marketing history. But if you do, something that, kind of puts off your customer, let's say it's an innovation that falls flat or a pricing strategy that they don't like, they're not going to immediately run to your competitor and buy from them. They're going to give you the benefit of the doubt. They'll make it right. They'll get it right next time. I trust that they're going to somehow address this and we'll continue with a positive relationship. For a brand, that's critical because, like I said, we all make mistakes. Brands make mistakes. And if you have that kind of resilient relationship, that is almost like armor against your customers running off to your competitors the first time you make a mistake.
Wow. Ah, that's so interesting. It's basically, I don't want to say a recipe, but a guide on how to make sure that you have a good brand. You had a good.
I think of that as like it's a checklist kind of
yeah.
thing. And that's one of the things when I work with my clients is we work through this together and say, okay, what's your score on familiarity with your customer, and how can we improve that, and kind of go down the list to see, how can we assess this relationship. That's how I do it.
Got it. So I'm just not sure if I got the favorable one. Would you mind explaining it again?
Yeah, there's two kind of aspects to it. Favorability is first and foremost about adding value. Are you adding value to your customer with every interaction, with every product you sell, with every service you provide? Are you adding real value? Now, the key here is that's not determined by the brand. That is determined by the customer. You can't tell a customer, yes, I'm adding value. No, they're going to tell you if you're adding value or not. So favorability, one part of that is, that this is mutually beneficial. You are adding value to the customer in turn is adding value to you by helping your bottom line, by buying from you. It also has to do with just generally, how do you approach your customer? Do you have a favorable approach? Do you showcase to them that you like them, you feel good about them, you understand them, you're working in their favor? That's the other piece of that that is very much important.
Oh my God, I love it. I think this is so interesting. I'm not gonna lie, because at the end of the day, we live in a capitalistic society. We're going to this cyberpunk dystopian future where at least that's my view of the world, where the companies rule everything. So I feel like I'm peeking behind the curtains a little bit, on how things work, and or at least ideally how they should. I'm not gonna lie, I think it's extremely interesting.
Thank you. Yeah, it's it's my passion. It's what I love to do, and I love helping companies kind of work through this, because I think most companies, they want to do right by their customer. I don't think most companies set out to trick companies, not that trick customers, but obviously there are some that do that, right? But if we think about consumer facing brands, generally they're trying to do right, but it's a combination of short-term thinking, not being aware of many of these things, not being strategic about how they think about these things, that leads to problems down the road.
While you were listing the five Fs, I was just trying to imagine how Apple fits into how they apply those 5 Fs into their business, how ChatGPT apply. And I couldn't stop thinking about this famous keynote that Steve Jobs gave a long time ago. When was that? I think probably 2009 or around that era, when the iPhone 4S came out. Do you remember? And then the antenna gate happened. But the consumers were holding it wrong. Do you remember?
Right. Yes, I do remember that. Yeah. I don't think blaming the consumer is ever a good strategy. Now, there's a different way you could have gone about that, is just provide education. If that was the case, just provide education without judgment. But once you start to say you're doing it wrong, oof, that rubs people the wrong way.
Yeah, Steve Jobs showed his true colors everywhere.
Well, I think Steve Jobs. I think the thing that really stood out there was that for so long, Steve Jobs really did have his finger on the pulse of his customer base, and so to see a slip like that, was a little surprising. So I think that's why it stood out so much.
Dr. Chris, we need to go into a short sponsor break, and we're gonna be right back. See you soon.
Okay.
All right. Parents, have you been searching for an app that's both fun and educational for your kids? I've got something exciting to share with you today. It's called FunTastic Plus. FunTastic Plus is a free app where education meets entertainment, designed specially for children ages 2 to 12. It's built by experts, completely ad-free and totally safe, so you can feel confident handing your phone or tablet to your little ones. Inside the app, kids will find a world of engaging content, their favorite cartoons, audiobooks and songs to spark imagination, educational games that make learning fun, and all of that to keep them entertained while supporting their development. FunTastic Plus is available on iPhones and iPads and even works offline, so whether you are on a road trip, flying, or just at home, your kids will always have something to enjoy. So if you're ready to give your kids a space that's both fun and educational, download now FunTastic Plus for free on the App Store. FunTastic Plus, a safe and ad-free educational platform for kids. Link on the description below. All right, and we're back. Thank you so much, FunTastic Plus, for sponsoring the show. Parents, go check it out. It's an amazing app, and I'm sure your kid's gonna love it. All right, we're back, Dr. Chris.
All right. Hopefully that wasn't a gross commercial.
No.
I'm kidding.
Hopefully not. It's amazing. The app is amazing, guys.
There you go.
All right. So before going to your sponsor break, we were talking about Apple, right?
Yeah.
Would you say that's a company, like, let's take this company as an example.
Mhm.
Do they generally apply this resilience relationship well, or?
Yeah, I can only speak as an outsider. I haven't worked with them, so I can only speak as someone from the outside. But it certainly appears to me that, as a rule, in general, they do. We could probably go through everything that they do and find examples of where they've fallen short. But you're always going to fall short in some categories. That's why we always have to work at it. But I think when you think about brands that people love. There are brands that people like, there are brands that people buy repeatedly, and then there are brands that people actually love. And those brands are actually few and far between. But I would consider Apple one of them. That, I know for myself, like, all of my electronics are Apple. And I use them as an example sometimes of, that forgiving part of the relationship, because, like, take that antenna gate for an example. When that happened, I didn't run off and you buy an Android because of it. I saw it as this clearly was a little bit of a mess up here, but I assume that they're going to get it right based on my experience with them over time, right? And so I think that's a good example of how that forgiving aspect of a resilient relationship becomes very important, because for a lesser known or lesser appreciated brand, that would have probably created quite a backlash that hit their bottom line very hard. But instead, it created a ripple for sure. But I think people trusted that they're going to get this right. This is they'll fix this somehow, and they did.
It's such a weird relationship, because at the end of the day, those are just products, right? They're there in order, in a way, to serve us, to make our life better. And if for whatever reason there's an antenna gate or something that annoy us, why wouldn't we just go and buy an Android?
Yeah. And you think about any human relationship, right? When you have a strong relationship with another person, whether that's a spouse, a sibling, a parent, a friend, you know, we're humans. We screw up. We do dumb things. We hurt people unintentionally. Sometimes we hurt people intentionally. But if you have that kind of positive, resilient relationship with another person, you're going to find a way to work it out. You're not going to trash the relationship because of one mistake. And I think that's very different than, someone maybe you just met who does something that irritates you or upsets you. You're much more likely to say, you know what, I've had enough, and move on. And so I think that, while these are just things, we don't buy products just to have things. We buy them out of an emotional need as well as a functional need. And when a company realizes that, and they are careful and intentional about providing the kind of emotional benefits that people want from their company, then they're much more likely to create those resilient relationships that help them sustain profitability over time.
I see. Yeah, but being smart, being self-aware, being smart about it.
Absolutely. So much is about self-awareness. Personally and organizationally. Self-awareness. Being honest, doing honest appraisal of yourself. In the case of a company, of your brand, of your product, of your messaging, of your customer engagement, and not getting defensive about where maybe you have shortcomings, but instead acknowledging those and working on them is a much better approach.
I see. I would like to touch a little bit more on the aspect of those big corporations. We talked a little about Amazon. I would like to talk about Nestlé now, for example. I know is that okay?
Nestlé?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked with them a few times.
Oh, you work with them? Oh my God. That was
I'm not currently working, but I have worked with them on a couple of occasions in the past.
I see. All right. So I guess you're the right person to ask that, because I heard rumors that they were like hiring kids and slave work, and like they don't treat people nice in Africa or anywhere in the world where they operate. Like there's people boycotting Nestle. I was like, you heard about that, right?
I have not actually. No, I haven't. But yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I think we're hearing that more and more now about companies. I think people are more aware.
Okay. Yeah, I also don't want to spread misinformation, so I'm gonna look up online. Google is working, so let me share the screen. Reports and lawsuits have accused Nestlé of involvement in child labor and modern slavery in its supply chains, primarily for cocoa in the Ivory Coast and palm oil seafood in Southeast Asia. All right, so the text go on and on. Allegations of child labor and slavery, forced labor in seafood industry, work exploitation. All right, so the thing is, Nestle is such a big company, right? So I'm sure this is a small part of the company. At least I would like to believe it. How that there's several points here. How that doesn't completely destroy the resilient relationship.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I think when I hear these sorts of things, I immediately sparks my curiosity to learn more. Like, what is happening? How did this come to be? What are they doing about it? How are they handling it? Those things to me are as important as the fact that someone discovered that this is happening. I want to understand in context. These companies become so large that sort of having a handle on every part of your supply chain can become very challenging. And so I think many companies, particularly now, because you can't hide this stuff anymore. I think, before the internet really matured, it was easy for companies. Who knew what was happening in their supply chains? Nobody, And now with everything being broadcast, I think it's impossible for companies to hide this kind of stuff. And so, I encourage every company, do an audit, do a regular audit of, in this case, your supply chain, to make sure that you're not exploiting people, that you're not, creating problems for communities, because it's going to come out. Like someone's, you just can't hide this stuff. And so it's terrible that it's happening. I certainly don't condone that. And what it sparks for me is curiosity to understand in context. How did this come to be? What was it exactly that's happening? And how are they handling this? Are they acknowledging it and making efforts to resolve that and make amends for that? That to me would be a very important part of the equation of how I thought about a company.
I see. Oof.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I think, it's tough because I think companies didn't have to worry about that so much getting out. And so I think they just didn't pay as much attention to it. And so when these things come up, I'm sure that there are many, and I don't know the situation in Nestle, but I'm sure there's many companies where, these kind of supply chain issues come out and it's news to them as well, and it's like, oh my gosh, we have, now what? There's probably plenty of companies too that, it's not a surprise to, but I think there's plenty of cases where it would be. And so then, the question is, what are you doing about it?
Yeah, that's the big question. What are you doing about it? Yeah, man. And I'm not defending the company in any way, but I guess those supply chains, at some point, there's so many layers to it that those guys at the top, they don't. Again, I'm not defending. I'm just creating assumptions here. Maybe they are not fully aware of what's going on. I don't know, but
And I want to be clear too that I have no intention of defending that behavior. I think that there is context that I would need to consider to make a full judgment on the entire situation in the company. It's terrible if that's happening. It looks like it is. It has been. That's a terrible thing. And like I said, what I would want to know is, okay, what are you doing? What is the solution? How are you, rectifying this? How are you making amends for this? Those kinds of things.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, you shouldn't even get involved with this to begin with.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Chris, so whenever you're asked to work at one of those companies, let's Nestle, I see that you also work for Coca-Cola. Like, what is usually their request? What exactly they ask you to do? Like,
it runs the gamut. So the work that I do a lot of consulting. I do keynote speaking at conferences or industry expos, workshops, master classes. I do a lot of that work, and it kind of runs the gamut. But it is all focused on consumer psychology. So that is my wheelhouse. If there's been plenty of times where a company has approached me with a request and my response has been, I don't think you need a consumer psychologist for this. You can find a strategist or, someone else that can probably do this better than I can. I'm here from primarily a psychology standpoint. And so the consulting and the work that I do is typically, how do we understand our consumers better? How do we understand not just what they say, but what's going on internally for them that will enable us to add value to them in a way that is meaningful and motivating? And so anything from, I do quite a bit of qualitative research. I've been a qualitative researcher for 30 years. And, so delving deep into the mindsets and the motivations of their customers. What is it that they want to accomplish? What is it they want to achieve? What problems are they dealing with? What is their life like? So that companies can understand that and find ways to add value in a meaningful way. So that again, that is the not gross part about it, is adding actual value that your customer appreciates and wants. And when you understand the psychology of why they buy what they buy, why they use what they use, then you have the opportunity to find those areas where you can make things better for them.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah, it makes total sense. I think it ties back a little bit to the self-awareness part that you mentioned earlier. So the company is trying to, in a way, understand themselves better, understand their consumers better. Yeah, I see.
Yeah, it's an interesting part of what I do too, which is helping them understand themselves better, the companies, really assess their engagement, and how they're thinking strategically, and is that going to align with what your customer wants and needs in the long term?
Got it. Uh, how receptive are them from your findings? Is it always we agree 100%, let's roll with it,
I
or
wish.
you will?
Yeah. Here's the thing. Most of the work that I do, and I always try to couch it this way, I'm just relaying to them. I'm the messenger. I'm relaying to them what their customers are telling me. Now, I am analyzing that information and looking deeper into that. So, I'm not just repeating back what the customer said. I'm trying to look at what are they really saying with this. They say this, and this, but if you engage with enough customers, you start to see patterns and you start to see trends in what they're telling you that give you some understanding of a deeper need or a deeper feeling or a deeper aspiration that they have. And that's the work that I do. And so when I present my findings to a company, I am relaying to them the needs of their customers, the needs that and aspirations that they have, or the problems that they're facing. So I think it becomes challenging to say, "Oh no, that's not true." That's that I think would be pretty short-sighted. Sometimes we have a conversation about what it means and what do we do about it, the nuances around it. But I'm typically the voice of the customer to the client.
And at the end of the day, they paid you to do that. So the fact that they are rejecting it later, it's
Yeah, you'd be surprised. Yeah, it's amazing to me sometimes, and it doesn't happen that much, much now. Like running my own company, and I have conversations with potential clients before we even get started. But certainly back in my agency days, there would be many times where the higher ups would hire the agency. And then but that's not who you're typically working with. You're typically working with, middle managers or that type of group. And sometimes they're just like, no, we don't want your help. It's like, okay, I don't know what to do here because you guys are paying us. So, it is a little, I think sometimes people can feel defensive about it. And I do my best to take away judgment from this. That's not what it's about. It's about how can we do better for our customer so that our influence is trusted and has real impact. And if there's a company that doesn't want that, they probably don't want to work with me.
I see. Yeah, having like a chat beforehand sounds smart. See, it's a good fit and stuff like that. I couldn't stop thinking during our conversation. I couldn't stop thinking about this AI Coca-Cola commercial that they released for Christmas last year. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I don't recall it, but I remember hearing some buzz about it.
Everyone in the world is against AI art right now. Like, I'm not one of them, but basically everyone else seems to be. And Coca-Cola, for whatever reason, I guess they are so out of touch with whatever they produce a full-fledged AI commercial, and it just feels so uncanny. And I'm in favor of some aspects of AI art, and I don't know how they greenlit that thing. So would you say that's an example of how they are lacking some self-awareness, or how do you see this whole thing running going behind doors?
Well, I think part of it is just that we're in such early stages
Just
of
experimenting.
experimenting with
Yeah.
AI, and so there's going to be bumps in the road. There's going to be misfires, so I would give some grace here on that, and you know, particularly again, I'd want to see how did they respond to the backlash. But I think when it comes to AI art, I think there's, and I'm not necessarily against it, but I do think in some ways we've kind of we're experimenting as a society. We're trying to figure out how to use this in a way that people again adds value to people and actually people want. But I think that one of the things that is so important in marketing is authenticity. And I think when you start going full AI, I think that raises some questions about how authentic is this. So I think that's one question. I think another becomes almost similar to the Nestle example. In it's a matter of business practice. Like, so are creatives getting shut out of this process? Are actors not getting paid now? Are those types of things where that starts to feel a little exploitative? And so I think, there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered simply because we are in the very early steps of how do we incorporate AI into society.
I see. So the consumers see that company X is using AI, so they must be cutting corners. They must be okay. I saw someone today posting on Instagram that they saw the writers from Stranger Things. Like, so someone took a picture from the from the guy who wrote the script from Stranger Things, and he had like a tab from ChatGPT open.
Oh no!
And everyone's like, "That's why the show is shit." Like, everyone trashing the guy just had like one tab open. You couldn't even see what the tab.
Like probably making vacation plans through it or something. Who knows? But no, I think there is that it's something that companies need to pay attention to. There's a lot of skepticism and suspicion about AI and where it's going, how companies are going to use it. I think there's a lot of fear about people being replaced, and so I think that it's very important that companies think carefully and be very strategic about how they use AI and how they communicate and be transparent about how they use AI and what that means, for the people in the company, as well as for their consumers, as well as for people that are in supportive roles like actors and writers. I think that concern is one that's valid. But again, we're in the early stages of how do we incorporate this, and I am certainly not against AI in theory. I think that it can be an incredible assistant, if you will, in creativity and strategy and writing and all of those things. But I also think that when it starts to become a replacement versus an enhancement, that's where it gets a little iffy, and we are still figuring out the rules there.
I really like that. The problem is like when it start becoming a replacement instead of what's the word you use again? Supporter?
Yeah,
Enhancer. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it makes all the sense. Yeah, it should. I'm gonna share my 2 cents. I feel like it should be a tool, right? Like
absolutely.
that should be there to help you whenever you need it, but should not do whole work for you. Otherwise, I mean, you need to
Sure,
use your brain.
being a tool, but not a crutch, right? I mean,
Exactly. I love it. Yeah.
it's as a tool, it's incredibly valuable. I mean, my ability to research certain topics and psychological principles and things has increased dramatically as a result of AI. Now, the other thing though is that I have to do a lot of back checking because sometimes you get information from AI that is a little sketchy. So it's important to again, it's don't let it replace critical thinking. Don't let it replace, strategic thinking, creative thinking. Those things still, there's no machine on earth that can do that better than humans. Now, AI can help enhance that dramatically, and I think that's fantastic. But ultimately, we have to still be critical thinkers.
I love it. I couldn't agree more. And sometimes like there's one tiny context that the AI doesn't get, and it completely changed the direction of the conversation. I mean, I could go on and on. I have so many examples where I was just researching some topics or getting to explain some situations to the AI, and they always give me like answers or solutions like they felt off. And then 1 or 2 days later, I'll bring up like one detail of the story or that I missed, and then the results will be completely different. Like, especially, I have one example in mind right now. Like, I was researching some law, like some rental law in Germany, and I would go on and on and on trying to understand, and they always give me like a bogus solution. And then I just added an element. Oh no, but the room is furniture. There's already like a couch in there. It changed everything. Everything. Like 1 week of research with I was just using it. I was trying to focus only on using it. Change everything. It's like, dude, it's like it's not there yet. It should not replace critical thinking, should not replace other types of research. And
Yeah, again, like it's a powerful tool.
yeah.
And that's a good thing. But yeah, I think when we just follow it blindly and give up critical thinking, then that can lead us into a whole, set of issues that are challenging.
Dr. Chris, have you ever worked with anyone in the gaming industry?
Not for years, way back in the day. This is probably 15 years ago or so. We did a couple of projects with EA Sports, but I was only marginally involved.
Okay, I see EA. Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
The reason why I'm asking is because I also work in the gaming industry, and I develop games for a living as well. And I was talking with a buddy of mine the other day, and we reached the conclusion that through AI, making games is becoming so easy. There's so many of new games out there every single day. There's more and more and more games, and they're all great. So actually, games are becoming much more like trends.
Mm.
Like memes. Like I'm not saying the games are memes, but like memes are like trends. Like the meme of the moment is such, and that's what's going to be relevant for now, for a few weeks, or for exactly.
Yeah.
And I also see a little bit that on Hollywood, a little bit less though. And I would like to ask you, what's the psychology behind that?
Yeah, wow.
It doesn't feel like it's a big question. It doesn't feel very. Anyway, I'll let you.
I want to make sure I understand your hypothesis. So the way that consumers engage with gaming,
yeah,
has gone from like more long-term sustained involvement to what's the big game right now, and I'm going to do that for a little bit until a new big game pops up.
Not even big game. It could be a small game. It's just the game. It's the trend. It's like it became funny for a reason on social media. Now everyone's playing. It doesn't matter if it's big or small. But that's the thing. Before it mattered. Like if it was a big game, there were not a lot of big games out there. So anytime that a big game came out, it was like an event. Everyone would play it. Everyone would talk about it. Now, not so much. It doesn't matter because there's so many of them, big, small. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think I'm going to look at this strategically because I'm sure there's a zillion different reasons for that. But one that I think happens frequently with organizations is when there isn't as much competition. They don't have to think or strategize as much for how do we maintain our customer base, right? It's because there's not a lot of competition out there. So in the gaming sense, it would be, there's not a ton of games out there that are really compelling and great. And, there's a handful that people love. And so they work on how do we make the game exciting or what have you, but they're not thinking about that long-term resilient relationship with their players, right? Because they didn't have to. But then when competition comes in and explodes, they haven't been working that muscle, right? About like, how do we keep people engaged in this game? How do we evolve along with our players to offer the kind of experience they want? And so when that happens, people will tend to jump around. And that happens in just about any category you can name if you're not thinking about long-term engagement strategy. And it takes some time to catch up. And usually by the time companies catch up, it's too late.
I see. So would you say that it all comes down, it goes back, circles back to this resilience relationship?
Yeah, and I think just in certain aspects of the resilient relationship become even more important, and that favorability of how are we adding value, how are we uniquely adding value that they can't get elsewhere, would be one of the questions that I would ask these game makers is, what are you doing to evolve with your players' needs as more and more games enter the arena? What are you doing strategically to evolve, add value, keep them engaged, give them what they want, so that they're not just running away and jumping on the next trend, right? This has happened throughout history. I mean, there's a great example of, Swiss watches used to be the absolute gold standard in timepieces, right? And I'm not sure when this happened, but it, obviously it was probably 60s or 70s. Someone approached them and said, digital watches are becoming big. You should, really consider getting into that market. And they said, no, why would we do that? We're Swiss watches. We're the gold standard. We're not going to do that. And they ended up missing out on something that was really important. Now, Swiss timepieces are still beautiful, but they certainly aren't the market behemoth that they once were, and that was another example of just not thinking long-term about how are customers' needs evolving and their expectations evolving, and how do we stay relevant to them considering those evolving needs.
Got it.
Yeah.
Wow, it's fascinating, man.
People are fascinating, for sure.
Whew, Dr. Chris, man, I could go on and on. It's really, really, really interesting. Thank you so much. I'd like to ask you where people can find you, if you have anything else you'd like to say.
Absolutely. So easiest ways to find me, go to my website. So thepsychologist.com, and it's BUYCOLIGST.com. And you can learn all about me there. You can find out, the kind of work that I do. You can learn about me as a person and my background. And I have a newsletter that people can sign up for. It comes out once a month. I keep it just to once a month because I do a deep dive each month into a certain aspect of consumer psychology that is designed to give the reader an unfair advantage in their career. So, anything from how to capture and engage attention, how to evoke emotion, how to influence behavior, all of those things. Each month I take a deep dive, and every one of these is very important to me that you read it and you actually get not just perspectives, but actual perspectives and tools that you can use in your own day-to-day work. So you can sign up for that there. I also just started a Substack, so you can find me on Substack. I've been having a lot of fun writing on Substack. But those are some great places. Or look me up on LinkedIn. My handle is Dr. Chris. And I love hearing from people. And it's great when I do these kind of interviews and people reach out to me afterwards. It's always a great thing.
All right. Perfect, man. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Brew. I appreciate it.
Me too. All right, everyone. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. See you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. If it's your first time watching the show, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please rank the show for link on the description below. Be a BRUCAST model and get free stuff. We'd love to see how you and your loved ones enjoy BRUCAST. Snap a picture of yourself, your family, your friends, or even your pets wearing BRUCAST merch, or watching an episode of the show, and send it to us and become part of BRUCAST. We will feature you in your pictures at the end of every episode, just like the ones you're seeing on the screen right now. You can upload your pictures at brew-cast.com/contact or tag us on social media. Alright everyone, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much and see you next time. Bye bye.